Letter 45 to the Honourable Daines Barrington, Selborne. Mugiri vidibus sub pedibus terram, et descendere montibus ornos. Reader's Note. You can sense the earth groaning beneath your feet, and the ash trees sliding down from the mountains. Translation, Peter Yearsley. End note. When I was a boy, I used to read, with astonishment and implicit assent, accounts in Baker's Chronicle of walking hills and travelling mountains. John Phillips, in his Cider, alludes to the credit that was given to such stories with a delicate but quaint vein of humour peculiar to the author of the splendid Shilling. I nor advise nor reprehend the choice of Markley Hill. The apple nowhere finds a kinder mould, yet 'tis unsafe to trust, deceitful ground. Who knows but that once more this mount may journey, and his present site forsaken, to thy neighbour's bounds transfer? Thy goodly plants affording matter strange for law debates. But when I came to consider better, I began to suspect that though our hills may never have journeyed that far, yet the ends of many of them have slipped and fallen away at distant periods, leaving the cliffs bare and abrupt. This seems to have been the case with Nore and Wetham Hills, and especially with the ridge between Hartley Park and Wardleham, where the ground has slid into vast swellings and furrows, and lies still in such romantic confusion as cannot be accounted for from any other cause. A strange event that happened not long since justifies our suspicions, which, though it befell not within the limits of this parish, yet as it was within the 100 of Selborne, and as the circumstances were singular, may fairly claim a place in a work of this nature. The months of January and February in the year 1774 were remarkable for great melting snows and vast gluts of rain, so that by the end of the latter month the land springs, or levants, began to prevail and to be near as high as in the memorable winter of 1764. The beginning of March also went on in the same tenor, when, in the night between the 8th and 9th of that month, a considerable part of the great woody hanger at Hawkley was torn from its place and fell down, leaving a high freestone cliff naked and bare, and resembling the steep side of a chalk-pit. It appears that this huge fragment, being perhaps sapped and undermined by waters, foundered, and was engulfed, going down in a perpendicular direction, for a gate which stood in the field on the top of the hill, after sinking with its posts for 30 or 40 feet, remained in so true and upright a position as to open and shut with great exactness, just as in its first situation. Several oaks are also still standing, and in a state of vegetation, after taking the same desperate leap. That great part of this prodigious mass was absorbed in some gulf below, is plain also from the inclining ground at the bottom of the hill, which is free and unencumbered, but would have been buried in heaps of rubbish had the fragment parted and fallen forward. About 100 yards from the foot of this hanging coppice stood a cottage by the side of a lane, and 200 yards lower, on the other side of the lane, was a farmhouse, in which lived a labourer and his family, and just by a stout new barn. The cottage was inhabited by an old woman and her son and his wife. These people in the evening, which was very dark and tempestuous, observed that the brick floors of their kitchens began to heave and part, and that the walls seemed to open and the roofs to crack. but they all agree that no tremor of the ground, indicating an earthquake, was ever felt, only that the wind continued to make a most tremendous roaring in the woods and hangars. The miserable inhabitants, not daring to go to bed, remained in the utmost solicitude and confusion, expecting every moment to be buried under the ruins of their shattered edifices. When daylight came, they were at leisure to contemplate the devastations of the night. They then found that a deep rift or chasm had opened under their houses and torn them, as it were, in two, and that one end of the barn had suffered in a similar manner. That a pond near the cottage had undergone a strange reverse, becoming deep at the shallow end, and so vice versa. That many large oaks were removed out of their perpendicular, some thrown down, and some fallen into the heads of neighbouring trees, and that a gate was thrust forward, with its hedge, full 6 feet, so as to require a new track to be made to it. From the foot of the cliff, the general course of the ground, which is pasture, inclines in a moderate descent for 1/2 mile, and is interspersed with some hillocks, which were rifted in every direction, as well towards the great woody hanger as from it. In the first pasture the deep clefts began, and running across the lane and under the buildings, made such vast shelves that the road was impassable for some time, and so over to an arable field on the other side, which was strangely torn and disordered. The second pasture field, being more soft and springy, was protruded forward without many fissures in the turf, which was raised in long ridges resembling graves, lying at right angles to the motion. At the bottom of this enclosure the soil and turf rose many feet against the bodies of some oaks that obstructed their farther course and terminated this awful commotion. The perpendicular height of the precipices, in general, is 23 yards. The length of the lapse, or slip, as seen from the fields below, 181, and a partial fall, concealed in the coppice, extends 70 yards more, so that the total length of this fragment that fell was 251 yards. About 50 acres of land suffered from this violent convulsion. 2 houses were entirely destroyed. One end of a new barn was left in ruins, the walls being cracked through the very stones that composed them. A hanging coppice was changed to a naked rock, and some grass grounds and an arable field so broken and rifted by the chasms as to be rendered, for a time, neither fit for the plough or safe for pasturage, till considerable labour and expense had been bestowed in levelling the surface and filling in the gaping fissures.